I'm Scott Wright, the CEO of ClickArmor, which is an innovative gamified learning platform for teaching employees and other individuals the defensive skills they need to reduce risks. And you'll learn more about how ClickArmor does this a little bit later on. But in each episode of Can I Be Phished, we'll go through a process to help you determine whether or not a phishing email or a scam is safe or suspicious. For phishing emails, we use a process I call unboxing the phishing email. And it includes things like the gut feel garbage check, sender sanity, link elusiveness, and body believability. Now, in each episode of Can I Be Phished, I also like to get other perspectives from people. And today I have a special guest who is Dave Ockwell-Jenner. He's a VP of Information Security at Arctic Wolf, which is a managed security service provider here in Canada. It's growing in the US and around the world. And so we're going to start with a look at a phishing email together to look at what I call an imminent expiration notification from TD Bank. And it's the kind of email you might get that, is warning you your online banking is going to be discontinued. So we're going to look at that. I'll introduce Dave first of all, and then he and I will go through this email together to look at the clues. And finally, Dave will share with us one of his many stories, and I'd love to have him back a little bit later to go through some of his other stories. But without any further delay, let's start episode 2 of Can I Be Phished? And I'd love to hear your feedback and would love it if you would go to clickarmor.ca and give us your feedback and learn more about gamified learning for awareness.
All right, we are here now with Dave Ockwell-Jenner from Arctic Wolf. Hi, Dave.
Hi, Scott. How you doing?
I'm very well. How are you today?
I am hanging on in there despite my best efforts.
Excellent. So as most people know, especially those who have listened to my podcast before with Tom Eston, I'm here in Ottawa, Canada. It's not so sunny today, but that's life. Dave, where are you located right now?
I am in beautiful Kitchener, Ontario, where I am happy to report it is very sunny.
Oh, nice. That's good. And that's coming our way, I think. You're from west to east usually.
Yeah, I'll send it up the road. It'll be fine.
That's great. Excellent. So I guess before we jump in, maybe you could give us a little background on what you've been doing in security and what your role is now at Arctic Wolf.
Sure. Well, it's a long and varied journey, and it started many, many years ago when I had hair. So picture me without the reflection here. Yeah, me too. So yeah, I guess I got my start in the whole security thing with Nortel. So many, many years ago, sort of early 2000, 2001. I had just transferred from Nortel in the UK, came over to work with them here in Canada. And it was around about that time that there were a bunch of nasty viruses that had sprung up called Code Red and Nimda, if anyone remembers those. Yeah, long time ago.
Yeah. Actually, at the time, neither of us was working really in security at the time, were we?
Absolutely. No, I was a web development guy at that point in my career. And this stuff just came along and it ruined my day. Everything stopped working, and just a bunch of my IT colleagues and myself, we decided we would learn a little bit about what was going on and see if we can't help fix this. So that was kind of how I got that sort of start. Fast forwarding a little bit, I left Nortel as the ship was beginning to tilt. I jumped off the other side.
That was around 2003, probably.
That's right. Yes, and I ended up at BlackBerry. Well, RIM at the time, but now BlackBerry.
Yeah.
And actually spent some time again building some things for a while. So putting together some websites, some web applications, and then sort of slowly transitioned over to this other side of things. So it transpired that I was almost as good at taking things apart as I was at putting them together in the first place. And that was a skill that, really was in some demand.
Yeah.
So I spent a number of years sort of trying to help secure a bunch of different systems that the BlackBerry had. And then from there, actually moved into a completely different industry. So I went into the world of aviation IT for the following 13 years. So I spent a good chunk there working for a company called CETA.
Yes.
So they are an IT supplier to the aviation world, and got involved very heavily in security from everything from the infrastructure right through the applications, and then eventually all the way up into building what is effectively a defensive team, I guess.
Nice.
So the full monitoring capability, the people to back that up, keeping an eye on these global aviation networks 24/7.
Awesome. That's cool.
That is good.
Now you're doing something else.
That is true. So I left CETA at the end of 2019. And there's a half joke here, right? Whenever I leave somewhere, it doesn't end well for the place that I leave.
Oh, well,
so
that's good for you.
I left Nortel. Things did not work out great. I left BlackBerry. They went through a dark period. And now I've left CETA, and the whole aviation industry is suffering. So I promise it wasn't me. I didn't do it.
It's interesting. Yeah, I didn't notice that pattern, but now that you mention it.
That's right. So earlier this year, I joined a company called Arctic Wolf. So effectively a security vendor. Been operating in the security space now for a number of years, growing extremely rapidly. So came from a sort of a kernel of a startup idea and has really just exploded since then. And I just figured, what a better time to take up the challenge of being responsible for security for a security company.
Yeah.
So that is where I am.
That's great. And I have to say, I think I first came across you at a conference here in Ottawa a few years ago. You were presenting.
Yes.
And
right.
There was an interesting story, and I think we're going to leave that one. Is that the same story that you're going to tell?
We may get there. I have so many stories, it's difficult. They kind of merge into one another.
Well, we might have to bring you back to tell more of that later.
I am known for good stories, so we'll see what we can come up with.
Well, that's good. So, so I appreciate you joining us today, and it's going to be interesting. We will dig a little bit deeper into the things you're doing at Arctic Wolf in a few minutes, but as I'm hoping to build this sort of a routine where we dig into a phishing email and just analyze it and show people what they could be looking for. And I think it'd be fun to just discuss our observations on this kind of thing. So in the first episode of the podcast, I went through a little bit of a checklist that I typically use. It starts with what I call the gut feel garbage check, just to kind of weed out the stuff that is obvious. But, that takes a second and there's still more work to do. So then we look at the sender sanity, we look at the linked elusiveness, and the body believability. There's a lot of alliteration there. So
I like it.
So to start with, let's have a look at this email. It's from TD Commercial Manager, apparently. And it says business client notice, user connected ID or connect ID renewal required. And it says, do not delete this important message, December 5th, 2017. You must review the document attached and follow the instructions to keep your Connect ID alive. Your document password is BNK44TD. Sounds like a good password from TD. Failure to comply with this time frame established will result in the suspension of your Connect ID. Signed TD Relationship Managers, WBB Commercial Services Limited, and then a PDF attachment, which is always fun. So that's what the email is. And so by looking at it, I'm not convinced it's really from TD. And I guess the first thing I would do is say, if I, as somebody who's looked at a lot of these, I probably would throw this right away. But I'd like to go through all the steps and just show people the different elements of the email itself that we can analyze. And
Sounds good.
To start with the sender. We did the garbage check. So I'm going to say it's likely garbage, but I'm going to keep going. So on the sender, as I explained in the first episode, you can click on the sender information on any email message to see information. Usually you want to find out what the email address was that it came from. And in this case, surprise, surprise, it's from commercial@cox.net, which doesn't sound like TD. So I think if I was actively looking at this, I would throw it out at this point, right?
Yeah, more effort required, bad guys. More effort required.
Yeah, they're getting lazy. I mean, it's not the worst phishing message I've seen.
No.
At least they put, last one I looked at, it was from Amazon. It just said service or something, right? As the sender name. So at least they're putting TD in the visible name. But I think, they're trying to get the people who don't bother looking for the email address or don't know how.
Yeah.
So we're teaching people that you click on the sender name to find the email address, and boom, there you find out right away. You can throw this message out just based on that information. The next step would be what I call the link elusiveness. Now, we don't see a link in this message, but could there be a link somewhere?
Well, who knows?
What do you think, Dave?
You know what? I think it's from my perspective, this would be a perfect time to go fishing with my mouse pointer. Not to overdo the analogy there, but typically the way to find links is to just hover over things and look for that mouse pointer that changes into a hand or some other kind of pointer.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. So we've got there is an attachment. I'm going to look at that in a minute. But in one of the previous messages, there was an image box with the name of the image, and so sometimes when you go over an image, it will change cursor. So that's a good clue that there could be a link there. I also mentioned before that I typically load read my emails with no image previews. In this case, there were no images, so I don't think my Mac tells me there were any images to load. So in that case, when I talk about link elusiveness, that covers attachments as well. And the reason is that these days, a lot of the links or a lot of attackers will try to embed a link within a document. So it could be an HTML attachment. It could be a PDF. And there are other things that in this particular case, we can learn about PDFs, and that is PDFs have their own ability to execute code. I don't know if anybody knows that, but and by default, for some reason, the Acrobat Reader has an option for a JavaScript enabling, and it's always on by default. So, I mean, there's a lot of power that these documents have, and I guess they do require JavaScript to run at times to do some of that functionality. So I guess they're fairly reticent to turn off the JavaScript. But what that actually enables is in a smartly designed JavaScript or PDF document, they can embed JavaScript that really just goes and gets some code from elsewhere. And when I talk about the link elusiveness, this is where they're hiding the linkage to something outside. And that is, if you were to open this PDF and analyze it, you would find some JavaScript in there that would actually go and grab some code and bring it down and run more JavaScript. Most likely, it will be looking for connections to other computers or all kinds of things. Typically, they're going to be looking for vulnerabilities within your own account environment. Does that sound reasonable to you, Dave?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think of these things a little bit like kind of these house parties that get out of hand, right? You hear these stories of people that, they invite someone for a house party and then they invite 10 of their friends and they invite 10 of their friends. Before you know it, you have like 1,000 people have showed up at your house. And that's a lot like these attachments, right? The attachment is your friend, you open it up and suddenly 10 of his friends join you as well.
That's a great analogy. I love that. Can I use that?
Absolutely.
Okay. I'll try to remember to put a copyright on it for you. But yeah, absolutely. It's kind of, we talk about backdoors or, things that allow other stuff to come in and do things that you weren't expecting. So that's part of the link elusiveness. So if it's a PDF and you're not expecting it, then just keep in mind that there could easily be some dangerous code in there. So even though there's not an obvious link here, the only thing that looks really dangerous potentially is the PDF itself. And that combined with the fact that the sender information was not related to TD is a good clue. Now, the last thing is what I call the body believability. So if you're not sure after all of this stuff, you could still check the wording and the makeup of the message. So the first thing in this message says, do not delete this important message. And it's got plus signs for some reason as the sort of margin highlights to make it stand out. And the wording, I don't think there's any terrible grammar here. but there are a few clues here. Do you see anything in this text, Dave, that kind of?
Yeah, there's certainly a few. I mean, there's the misspelling of December. I guess that's the new month that follows December.
I didn't notice that. It's true.
Yeah,
yes.
I saw that one. There's a few spacing anomalies as well. So one I'm trained to look for quite a lot is always, when there's 2 spaces or extra spaces, that always is a bit of a giveaway as well.
Yeah, something I point out sometimes to people is, don't get too anal about, typos. We all make typos, and even, people in the Amazon customer service department sending out, a message could still make a typo, and it might not get caught by the proofreaders. So I wouldn't be too upset about it, but you're right. I mean, there are certain things you would say, you know what, this just doesn't look right. So
yeah, let's just go look closer, right?
December is a pretty good clue. I like the document password, and this is just sort of a pet peeve that we all have as security people, right? To say, sending a password in an email with an attachment that the password opens is a little bit questionable, would you say?
I think there are probably safer practices than that. Yes.
Yes. So, and the password just it's almost funny, right? BNK44TD. So it's from TD Bank, and their password is going to have the letters TD in it. So that just sounds very, very bad.
That's right. And I would say the other one that caught my eye here as well is this concept of Connect ID. Now, I'm a TD customer. I have no idea what a Connect ID is, right? And I suspect maybe that they're also playing on this fact that, well, it sounds important. It sounds like I should have this thing. I don't really know what it is, so I'll be willing to just go with it for the purposes of the rest of the email, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I'm going to switch to another message because I actually have, if I can find it here, this is a real TD message, and there it is. And this is from online banking, and I'm probably going to blur out some of the, the personal information here when we do the published video, but what you'll see is there's not a lot of fancy formatting, so, and there's only one link, and the link in that one actually exactly mimics what you see. That's easyweb.td.com. So that is their online banking link. So if I was ever expecting anything from TD Bank, because this is the only account that I have with them, I would go back and check, okay, what does their sender information look like? Well, it's td.estatement.no-reply-account@td.com. So at least it's got td.com in the sender's email address. And the links that they're providing is reasonable, because it's always been their online banking service. But you're right, Connect ID, none of us have any idea of what that is. And it's interesting to just sort of think, okay, well, could I go back to something where I've received something from the people that this message claims to be from, and compare them? And that's a really effective way to try and eliminate the bad guys.
Yeah, and I think you see in that real example too, the type of language that's being used is, the phraseology is much more recognizable, right? If you are a TD customer, right, you log in, the first thing you see at the top, it says EasyWeb, so know that's a kind of a recognized.
So I was also going to point out, thanks for mentioning that, there is something else in that legitimate message I wanted to show. Are you seeing that right now?
I am seeing the old one, the dicey one.
Yeah. Okay, let me see if I can. I think it's this one here. Okay, so what they do is, rather than giving you any other links, they say to change your settings or unsubscribe, please log in to your EasyWeb and visit delivery preferences, etc. So they're gaining credibility here by not trying to show you too many links or complicate things, right? So I think it's important to recognize banks will not ask you to do very much other than go to their login page, and they won't ask you to do anything else.
Yep.
So that's so that pretty much covers that message. So I think we pretty safely discarded that one as a dangerous message based on a few things. But that's the process that I like people to follow. And do you have any comments on it? Anything that you would add?
No, I mean, I think that is a great process, and that's something that we need to get better at doing, right? I think for many, many years as security professionals, we've perhaps done a bad job, right? We kind of think that everybody thinks like we do, right? You just look at the email and you're like, oh, well, you should just know that this is a malicious or a fraudulent email. Well, not everybody knows that. So if we can convey a process that people can follow, I think it's a lot easier, because they just basically do that repeatable process each and every time they receive an email. It starts to become second nature. So I really like that.
Well, yeah. And the other thing I try to emphasize is this is not a guarantee. If you pass the checklist, it doesn't mean it's a safe message, right? It's just a way of eliminating the ones that could be dangerous. And if you're still not sure, you need to check with your help desk or find some help, or just ignore it. Because if they really want to get you, they're going to contact you later.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, I think a lot of people maybe don't understand the volume of these malicious emails coming in, right? Because usually there's a lot of technology at the front door that's keeping a lot of this from most of our eyes. Yeah. And when you sort of step back and actually see, okay, of the million emails that came into our organization last month, 80 or 90% of them were just junk and we threw them on the floor. Well, you're only seeing that tip of the iceberg, right? So you now need to be extra vigilant, knowing that all the fancy technology has missed this. So it's true.
It's a concept that I try to teach when I'm talking to security guys or IT guys. That the reason that we really need to focus on security awareness now more than ever is, first of all, there's a lot of automation that are taking on the easy jobs, the easy decisions, right? And similarly, outsourcing, right? We're getting other businesses to do a lot of the work for us, and so we get the products of those. So there's typically less unimportant work. Everybody has more important decisions to make than they used to, and that means we all have to pay more attention. There aren't too many no-brainer tasks anymore, and so it's important.
Indeed. And it happens. I mean, we're all busy doing, 100 other different tasks and activities. I get that it's difficult to spend the time to look at each and every email. Yeah. But it is something I think we consciously have to try and encourage ourselves to do.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And one other thing, just to follow up on what you mentioned earlier about, the IT people kind of assume everybody knows this stuff. There's a really good book by Chip and Dan Heath called Made to Stick. It's a marketing book, actually. It's about getting messages across. And I remember one of the concepts in that is it's really hard for somebody who knows some kind of information to imagine what it's like to not know that information. And so that's the situation we're in as IT people. We know that where the threats are, but it's hard for us to imagine what the uneducated people, not uneducated, but unaware, because they haven't been shown, how they would react to these things.
Absolutely. And I mean, the way I've tried to ration this out sort of throughout my career is thinking, we breathe and live this stuff on a daily basis, so we know what it's like. If you were to throw me in a room full of accountants and tell me to do a forensic examination of our balance sheets and whatnot, I would be equally clueless as most people are looking at an email. So I kind of get it.
Awesome. That's great. Well, thanks a lot for helping me analyze that message. I appreciate your input and your tips on that.
You've probably heard about the Twitter breach, where some teenagers used social engineering to take over the accounts of some famous people like Bill Gates and Joe Biden. What you might not realize is that these social engineering attacks cost on average $130,000 in direct financial losses, and that doesn't include things like lost productivity or business disruption. It can also be shown that a lot of businesses are losing upwards of $1 million or more in each of these attacks. That's why we're excited to launch a new gamified social engineering defense course called Fakes and Frauds. It's part of the ClickArmor gamified cybersecurity awareness platform. Unlike traditional training, where employees watch the same video every year and experience death by PowerPoint, and they really don't learn much, ClickArmor's game-based training offers learning quizzes, puzzles, and fun exercises that really grab people's attention and get them thinking about real-life threats that they will face in the future. One employee of a customer of ours said, "It's the first time I've ever discussed how I did on an awareness course with coworkers." And this to me shows the positive impact that ClickArmor is having on corporate security culture. Gamified learning that is visually dynamic and animated is proving to be 80% more engaging. So employees are therefore more motivated to learn defensive skills. When you can show that employees are actually learning, you get a much better return on security awareness training investment. So visit us at clickarmor.ca today to access your free trial of Fakes and Frauds gamified social engineering defense course.
Now let's turn to your current situation, your environment, the kinds of things you're doing. What would you like to tell us and the audience about Arctic Wolf?
Yeah, so just to sort of make sure that everyone has a little bit of an understanding about what we do, we're effectively a managed security provider. We position ourselves as being a provider of security operations. And I think this actually ties quite nicely to what we were just talking about. One of the key things that Arctic Wolf focuses on is not just the technology. So I think many IT and security people, we know that there are hundreds of boxes out there with blinky lights, and you can spend an infinite budget on buying those bits of technology. And yes, they're very nice bits of technology, but ultimately that has to be used and managed and run and operated by someone. And if you are a business, you have a couple of choices. I guess you have three. You can choose to just ignore that this is important at all. Don't recommend that option. You could choose to try and build this out yourself, and I've certainly been on the end of the spectrum as well. Or you can look for a provider such as ourselves that will take care of that operations part for you. And I think there's sort of a really nice little symbiotic relationship here between the people and the technology side that I rarely see. So when I actually joined the organization in January this year, I was super excited to actually land in a place, and I was like, this is exactly how my mind works. So it was like,
and you
I'm
never
not
thought
crazy
you'd find
after
it.
all. I know. But I think we've really done a very good job of understanding this is what the technology can do, but these are its limitations, and this is where we need people. So one thing that Arctic Wolf really centers a large portion of what we do centers around is something we call the concierge security team. So if you are a customer of ours, you have named individuals that are effectively just like your own in-house security team. They will guide you with what you need to do from an architectural perspective. They will obviously be monitoring your information in your networks and tell you what's going on and provide recommendations for how to improve things as you go through, which I find pretty unique in this industry.
Awesome. So how do you find that, for example, the recent COVID situation has impacted, MSSPs or Arctic Wolf in particular and your clients?
Well, from our perspective, I think we've really seen a bit of a mixed bag. We've certainly seen some organizations and customers that have pulled back a little bit. I think maybe they're concerned from a budgetary point of view. On the flip side of that point, though, we've also seen organizations that potentially were going to, make the investment and build this capability out internally, and have now stepped back a little bit and said, well, maybe it makes a bit more sense to just get a service provider like ourselves to come and handle that. So we've seen sort of different levels of impact. As it relates to the market we're in, I don't think we have been impacted as much as many others. We're still seeing some very solid signs, in terms of new business that's coming in terms of us being able to support our existing customers. And it's really given us a great opportunity. This is going to sound very strange. It's given us a brilliant opportunity to test our business continuity plans.
Okay.
I was actually joking with our leadership team earlier this year. I said, if I came to you earlier in the year and said, okay, I want to send everybody home and I want to turn off all our office access and lock the doors just so we can test our business continuity plan, that would be okay, right? I suspect the answer probably would have been no. But when this particular situation began to unfold, that's exactly what we did. So nice. Around the mid-March area, we actually went fully remote. So our entire company works remotely and still are. So in some cases, we have some office facilities that are open on a limited basis. So if you need to go in and do printing or take advantage of some of the office facilities, they are there in some places. Right. But about 95% of our people are still working remotely.
Excellent. So is Arctic Wolf international? Like, do you have international clients?
So we are based in North America. So we split between the United States and Canada.
Right.
So we have the research and development is largely focused up here in Canada, but we have offices in California, in Utah, and also in Minnesota down there in the US.
And how big are you? How many people?
This is a number that changes literally by the hour. It's crazy how quickly we're growing. The last I looked, we were at 486, and the number only stuck because I remember 486 processors. That's how old I am.
Yeah, an oldie bit of goodie. Yeah,
yeah, that's right. Yeah, but we have been growing just a tremendous amount. I think we were sort of nearer the 400 mark when I joined in January of this year. So that gives you sort of an indication of what that growth profile looks like for us.
And it seems like the future looks bright for you guys.
I would never suggest anything other than that. No, it certainly does. And when I joined the organization, I said I'd spent 13 long years in an aviation setting, and it was kind of a big change, not just in terms of the industry, but you kind of hear these stories. I don't know if they translate super well from UK to Canada, but in the UK we have this sort of phrase around the cobbler's shoes are always broken, right? So he or she who mends the shoes, they always have terrible shoes. And I think one of the dirty little secrets of the security industry is there are a lot of security vendors out there that if they peer inside, maybe it doesn't look quite as great as some of the things they do for their customers. Mm-hmm. So I was had a little bit of sense of trepidation coming into a security organization of what that would look like. And it very, very rapidly put my mind at ease because I'd come in and the processes, even though it was a small company, still that startup culture, the processes that were already in place were really, really significant. It's actually been, I don't want to say an easy ride. Certainly if my management is listening, it's definitely not an easy ride. But it has been a fantastic journey so far. I'm loving every minute of it.
Well, that's great. And I expect your team is appreciating you and your sense of humor. From what I've heard of you, I follow you on LinkedIn and Twitter. It's always fun times. And you probably have some good stories. So I want to ask you if you have a story that you could tell us that might relate to phishing or things like that.
I do. And it relates, I think, perfectly to this idea of a fraudulent email. So this is going to be a new story for you. So I apologize. It's not the one that you know and love.
That's okay. We'll have you back again to talk about.
That's right. But this one I think will be as good, if not better. Let's try it out.
Okay.
So this actually dates back to 2012. So a number of years back now, but essentially what had unfolded, and we're not going to necessarily go in a linear fashion here. I'm going to jump around a little bit. How I got to know about the story I'm about to tell you was effectively because at that time I was running our security incident response team. We got an email from someone in our finance group saying, hey, I monitor something called an ethics mailbox. So the organization I was with, there was an ethics team, and they had different people cycling on that team, and this finance gentleman happened to be on duty, as it were, that day. So I've got this email. It seems a little strange. Can you take a look? And, that's when your spidey senses start kicking off, right? It seems strange. Can you take a look is like code word for I probably did a bad thing. That's right. So we had the team take a look at this email, and it didn't seem particularly concerning, right? It was not too dissimilar to the one that you showed earlier, right? Yes, there were a couple of misspellings, so the language was a bit off, but it didn't immediately say that there was anything super technical going on. So we kept an eye. We basically kept monitoring the situation, just said, if you get more of these emails, let us know, right? The standard sort of response. And I think it was about a month later, we actually got a hit from some of our monitoring technology on the same individual's laptop. It had executed a piece of malware. And we thought, well, coincidences do happen, but what are the chances? Let's go look. So as we start investigating, as we start unpicking this, it transpires that this particular individual was having an email conversation with a gentleman that wanted to report an ethics violation by some of our staff at an airport. And this conversation had actually gone on for almost 6 months. So there was a backwards and forwards, hey, I want to report this. Yeah. What do I do? What's the process? And so there had been this pretext had been set up over the course of about 6 months. And it ultimately got to the sort of the end of this conversation. And the threat actor sent an email with, okay, here's a video of the airport person doing this thing that I want to report. And lo and behold, the individual organization opened the video. And you think typically harmful, right? We check Word documents, we check PDFs, we certainly check links, but videos, we don't really get too many of those in email. It's not kind of usual that you see problems with those.
Yeah.
However, there was malware in the video, taking advantage of a particular flaw in the video player that everybody would have on their Windows system. And we looked at it, we investigated, we cleaned up, and we thought, okay, fair enough. That was kind of interesting. It was a little bit unusual.
Yeah.
6 months later, we detected some network communication from our internal network to somewhere external that looked very strange. Mm-hmm. And it looked strange because it was basically going to a domain name that looked a little bit like ours, but was slightly different. Wow. Now, in the organization, there are a lot of people doing a lot of things. So first thing we do is ask around, is this legit? Are you doing anything here? What is this thing? Nobody knew anything about it. And I'm going to miss out a whole chunk of the investigative part and get to the meat and potatoes here. Yes. It turned out we had an APT intrusion in the organization. They had been in there for an advanced persistent threat. Yeah. So basically, bad guys and girls that really know what they're doing. That's my interpretation of that.
And it takes place usually over a long period of time with
long period of time.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So we had found some evidence that this, activity found some evidence that this activity was ongoing, and started to, dig in and bring the full sort of incident response team to bear. That whole unraveling of that incident caused us to bring in some help. So we actually hired an external incident response firm called Mandiant. They came in and spent 6 months working with us on figuring out what was going on. Midway through that investigation, we actually worked out that the initial intrusion that the APT team had was actually assisted by this pretexting that I mentioned earlier. So this one phishing email, this one little video was actually how they had gotten into the network in the first place.
And they set off a bunch of other things that
That's
you
right.
didn't realize were still there.
Just things that we didn't see from an incident response perspective until later on. Now, where I think this gets, particularly sort of James Bondish, shall we say, is the threat actor had a particular mission, and it became fairly clear to us quite early on, actually, what that mission was. They were interested in understanding the movements of passengers around the world. So one of the things that our company did was take flight bookings. So that has information about who is flying from point A to point B, and so on. And it became kind of clear that what had happened is we'd put out a press release. Our organization put out a press release, and this harkens back to the story I know that you know. We had shared that this system had been improved. We had a new version of this booking system. And, it's so wonderful. It's the greatest thing that mankind has seen. Right. We worked out within a few weeks, they were actually in that very system trying to get that passenger detail.
Ah, wow.
And just like most of my stories, there's always a funny sort of punchline at the end. Okay. The funny part of this is they did actually complete their mission. So they got into our network. They went from one network zone all the way through right to the production environment where the system lived. They managed to extract the data from the system and exfiltrate that data. So pretty much everyone's worst nightmare, right?
Right.
The comedy piece here was, although our press release had said the system had gone live, we hadn't loaded any production data in it yet. So they had actually spent 8 months, I think it was, in total, to execute their mission of stealing test data. And
awesome. Good job, Dave.
We wish them well.
It was the world's biggest honeypot, right?
It was kind of exactly that. But I mean, we learned an awful lot from that experience. It certainly gave us a reason to upgrade a bunch of our capabilities. And again, not just the technical level, but we expanded the incident response team. We did a lot more training with those folks that were involved in that, so that they could spot things. Yeah. And we also took that message to everybody in our organization. So we relayed that story to everyone that was there. So that they knew this was the kind of stuff that, as a company, we were facing.
That's really interesting because, one of the common things you hear from IT people is, well, our people think they're not a target, right?
Right.
And it's not until your company has a very visible incident like this to say, this is how this happened, and you have to be very aware of this stuff, right? So
yes, absolutely. And we were somewhat fortunate because at the time, we are a major player. We were a major player in the aviation space. There were a lot of other organizations that were similarly targeted, including some specific airlines and airports. Wow. Many of them up in the news, right? And we were just sat back kind of, okay, it's going to be our turn next, right? We're going to be in the news, and that will, trigger a whole bunch of drama. But I think because we were able to, much like your phishing email process, we had a solid process even then. We were able to go step by step by step, and actually ultimately ended up defeating that mission quite successfully.
Excellent. Well, that's great. So happy ending, but a cautionary tale.
The best kind.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean,
that's great.
It really shows that, huge things come from one phishing email.
Yeah, it's a nice way to illustrate, the capability and the potential impact from one simple little video or something that people might click on. Right?
Yeah, very true.
You always wonder, when you get a boring old phishing email and you say, yeah, I'm pretty sure that's not real, but what are they really trying to do, right?
Yeah, and it is funny because you receive some from time to time, even as a security professional, it's fraudulent because it trips up all the signs, but you still can't quite work out exactly what the scam is.
Yeah.
And on occasion I've been, I don't want to say bored, but I've been needing some different kinds of entertainment, and from a very, I don't know, from a funny point of view, I guess, occasionally I will reply.
Right.
And I'll say, okay, I get that this is a scam. I see that you've worked really hard, but I must be dumb because I can't quite understand what it is. Can you explain it to me? And I have actually had one person reply, which I thought was fascinating. They actually replied back, yeah, just to explain what was going on. I was like, well, thanks very much.
Well, that's good. Actually, that makes me think of something I discovered. I'm going to be writing a blog post about this very shortly, I'm sure. But there are these scam baiters. I don't know if you've seen that, right? So
I have.
One of the most popular ones I stumbled on him the other day is a guy named Kit Bago.
Okay. Yeah, I think I'm familiar with the name.
Sorry, Kit Boga.
Okay.
And he basically, I think because his grandmother got scammed at one time or whatever, he devotes his whole YouTube channel to wasting scammers' times.
Yeah.
And it's not always phishing emails, but he does cover them sometimes. But quite often it's the calls or the voicemails saying call us back, and it's various different kinds of scams. But it's really interesting to watch him go through the process. He's very, very sharp, and he'll as he's stalling the people, he'll cut to another audio line and explain what they're trying to do, so it's a really interesting thing. So if you're into trying to figure out what they're doing, it's a great channel to
I should watch that.
Yeah,
I will.
Awesome. Okay, well, I think that kind of wraps up our episode for today, and really appreciate you joining me, Dave. It's been a lot of fun, and I think we'll definitely have to get together again and do another one.
Sure. I would love to. I do have a lot of stories. Some of them even make sense. So yeah, I would be willing to share anytime.
Excellent. Okay, well, I guess we're going to sign off now and thank everybody for joining us. And just one last note, how would people reach you, Dave, if you happen to be open to that?
Yeah, absolutely. The easiest way to find me is Googling my name. So I have a very unique name, Dave Ockwell-Jenner. That's O-C-K. You can just find me that way. I'm on LinkedIn, Twitter, all of the things. So feel free to reach out. And if you want to contact me directly via email, it's just dave.ockwell-jenner@arcticwolf.com.
And we'll put it in our blog, show notes blog post, so you'll be able to find it if people come to that. So yeah, once again, thanks a lot, David, and we will talk to you later.
All right, thank you. Bye-bye.
Well, that does it for another episode of Can I Be Phished? Hope you enjoyed our second episode with Dave Ockwell-Jenner and our analysis of the TD email. So do encourage you to go to clickarmor.ca and check out all the information we have on gamification of awareness programs and the new Fakes and Frauds course on social engineering defense, as well as our Gone Phishing course. So until next episode, please stay safe and stay secure.